Well, with a lack of affordable homes on the market, competition among home buyers in many parts of the country is heating up and resulting in some pretty fierce bidding wars. To find out where buyers are the most competitive, LendingTree ranked the 50 largest metro areas in the United States. And here to break down those findings for us is LendingTree's Chief Economist, Tendayi Kapfidze. Tendayi, good to see you again. So I'm going to get right to it. The number one place where you're seeing these bidding wars really heat up, not a big surprise to me, San Jose, California. Tell us why.
Yeah, so it has a lot to do with the amount of supply in a city, and we know that in San Jose, it's a very wealthy area, so there's a lot of competition amongst home buyers because a lot of people have wealth and can afford homes. And one finding, for example, is that the average down payment in San Jose is the highest in the country at just under 23%, versus a lot of other cities where the average down payment is actually below 20%. And then we also see in San Jose that for borrowers with credit scores that are really high, over 720, that's about 80% of people who are trying to buy a home in San Jose versus a low of around 50% in one of the low cities like Denver. So a lot of competition in San Jose because people are wealthy and they're trying to get into this hot housing market.
I have to say, I think San Diego and New York, if we're looking at this, what's up on the screen right now, a little bit lower on this list than I would have thought. Were there some surprises for you in terms of where we're seeing the most competitive home buyers?
I'll probably say the biggest surprise for me was Raleigh at number 3, because typically where we find the most competitive cities tend to be areas with higher home prices, and Raleigh's a relatively affordable mid-sized area. If we look at the cities where home buyers are least competitive, it's typically cities in the South that have lower home prices and typically kind of more permissive zoning and building regulations, and so they have a lot of new homes coming onto the market. The more competitive areas are areas where there are restrictions on building, older cities in the Northeast, for example, that maybe don't have as much space to grow. So it was a surprise to see Raleigh being up there as a very competitive area for home buyers.
I know when it comes to buying a home, the biggest hurdle for most people is coming up with that chunk of money, right? That initial down payment. How much has the average amount of a down payment changed during the pandemic? And what is that average amount right now?
Yeah, so we actually did another study last year where, one of the things we were thinking about is, are people using some of the money that they're saving basically from not spending and not going out, and maybe some of this government stimulus money that has consumers with almost $2 trillion in excess saving, is some of that flowing through into the housing market? And we actually saw that down payments increased about 3 or 4 percentage points last year versus the prior year. And so we're seeing consumers, because it's a hot housing market, you come to a lot down payment versus someone with a smaller down payment.
And I know that, if you're going to get into a bidding war with somebody, what are some of the things you should have on your side before you even jump into the fight, so to speak? I would imagine having a really good credit score is one of them, and you'd want to be pre-approved. What are some things that people should be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting pre-approved is essential because when a seller is looking at competing bids, what they're trying to assess, other than who's giving the best offer in terms of price, is what are the odds that somebody can get from contract signing to closing, right? So how do you get to approval and finally getting those funds transferred to the seller? So certainly having a pre-approval is one of the main things that a seller would look at to make sure that somebody is coming in with a real capability to complete the transaction.
What about somebody's credit score? What's a credit score that you should have to even think about getting involved in a bidding war?
Well, the credit score doesn't necessarily see the credit score. Where the credit score really comes into play is on your pre-approval and the strength of, how much money you can borrow, essentially. So that definitely comes into play on the mortgage pre-approval side. The seller doesn't necessarily get that information, but it's useful in terms of getting that pre-approval. And so when you have that pre-approval, that's what makes you competitive. Now, there are many programs that are available for people with lower credit scores. So I wouldn't discourage somebody with a low credit score from attempting to purchase a house. But I would certainly say that, you want to get your credit score in the best shape it can possibly be. If you think about a house as most people's largest purchase and the largest money, that's when the credit score really can do the heavy lifting for you in terms of saving you money.
And look, I know that mortgage rates have been inching higher, but still in the scope of things, they're still near historically low levels. I'm curious how many people really shop around, for the best mortgage rate. I know that we've talked in the past, you say you should at least look at 3 to 5 different places, but do most people take the time to do that?
Unfortunately, only about half of people actually look at 3 or more mortgage lenders. There've been a couple of studies by the CFPB where they found that people really don't shop around as much as would be optimal, right? And it's really surprising because people will go to all kinds of lengths, comparing gas prices, comparing the price of coffee in their neighborhood, but really for the biggest transaction that they engage in. Surprisingly, a lot of people still don't shop around, which is, kind of mind-boggling for me because the savings can be so substantial.
Yeah, I say do the legwork. Check out where you can get the best coffee and the best mortgage. Tendayi Kapfidze, Chief
Absolutely.
Economist at LendingTree. Thanks for being with us.